People don't value what's always there. This is a truth that applies to nearly every aspect of life, especially human relationships. When something is easily available, when it is constantly within reach, the human brain registers it as ordinary. It becomes part of the background, something predictable, something that requires no effort to obtain or maintain. But the moment that thing is removed, the moment its presence is no longer guaranteed, something changes within the mind. It begins to wonder, to crave, to analyze. This is the foundation of why absence is so powerful. It forces the mind to acknowledge what was once taken for granted. Think about the things you desire most in life. They are usually the things that are not readily available, the things that require effort, patience, and commitment. A dream job, a rare opportunity, a luxurious lifestyle. These things hold value precisely because they are not handed to everyone. They must be earned, and because of that, people long for them. But the moment something is always accessible, always available, on demand, its value drops. It no longer holds the same significance because the mind has adapted to its presence, assuming it will always be there. This principle applies directly to relationships. When someone is always available, always reaching out, always proving their feelings, they become predictable. And predictability is the enemy of desire. The human brain is wired to seek stimulation, to be drawn to the unknown, to be fascinated by mystery. But when a person constantly shows up, constantly reassures, constantly gives without any resistance, they remove that element of excitement. They remove the space needed for longing to develop. Now consider what happens when that availability is suddenly removed. The mind, which once assumed that person would always be there, is now confronted with a new reality. Their presence is no longer a given. This shift triggers curiosity, and curiosity breeds desire. The brain starts asking questions. Why haven't they called? Why aren't they texting? What are they doing? And just like that, attention is refocused. Humans are naturally drawn to what they can't fully grasp, to what feels just out of reach. The moment someone steps back, they create an emotional gap. And gaps are uncomfortable for the mind. The mind seeks to fill them, to resolve the uncertainty. It begins replaying memories, revisiting conversations, analyzing past interactions. This is the moment where absence transforms into power. It forces the other person to think, to question, to desire. This is why so many people struggle in relationships. They believe that the more they give, the more they show up, the more they prove their love, the more they will be valued. But this approach often has the opposite effect. It overwhelms, it suffocates, it eliminates the natural ebb and flow that relationships need in order to thrive. Love and attraction are not built on constant presence. They are built on moments of closeness, followed by moments of distance. This is what keeps passion alive, what keeps desire burning. Now, some might say, but if I pull away, won't they forget about me? And the answer is simple. Only if you were never truly valued in the first place. If someone has developed even a small emotional connection with you, your absence will not go unnoticed. In fact, it will magnify your importance, because the moment something disappears, the mind begins to measure its impact. It begins to compare the past to the present. It starts to question whether losing that presence was a mistake. But this only works if the absence is done correctly. Many people misunderstand this principle and attempt to use it as a manipulative tactic. They disappear for a day, hoping to spark a reaction, only to give in to the anxiety of waiting and reach out first. This destroys the effect. True absence is not about playing games. It is about genuine detachment. It is about shifting your energy inward, focusing on yourself rather than on how the other person is responding. When done right, this method rewires the other person's brain. Instead of seeing you as someone who is always available, always seeking their attention, they now see you as someone who is independent, someone whose presence is not guaranteed, someone they must work to keep in their life. And this shift is powerful. It places you in a position of value. People often confuse attachment with love. They believe that constantly proving themselves, constantly showing up, constantly being available is what keeps a connection strong. But in reality, attachment can be suffocating. Love flourishes in space. It grows in the moments when someone has the chance to miss you, to reflect on what you bring into their life. And this is where most people fail. They don't allow that space. They are so afraid of losing someone that they cling too tightly, not realizing that this very act is what pushes the person away. The fear of loss drives them to overcompensate, to over-explain, to overgive. And as a result, their presence becomes expected rather than desired. But when you step back, when you allow silence to speak, when you let absence do its work, something shifts. The person who once took your presence for granted is now faced with a new reality. They realize that you are not just an option, not just someone who will always be there no matter what. And this realization forces them to reconsider, to reevaluate, to desire. This is why absence is not weakness. It is strength. It is the key to shifting the dynamic, to making someone realize your value. It is not about making someone suffer or it is about creating the necessary space for appreciation to grow. And when you master this, you will never have to chase. You will never have to beg for attention, for validation, for recognition, because your presence will be something that is felt even in your absence. And that is where true power lies. People remember feelings more than they remember words. This is a fundamental truth about human psychology. The mind may forget the exact conversations, the specific moments, or even the precise details of interactions, but it never forgets how someone made them feel. That emotional imprint is what lingers long after the words have faded, shaping perceptions and creating attachments that are deeply ingrained in the subconscious. This is why certain people are unforgettable. It is not necessarily because of what they did, but because of how they made someone feel in their presence. The emotions tied to their existence become a permanent part of memory, replaying in the mind when they are no longer there. Every interaction carries an emotional charge, whether positive or negative. If someone associates you with excitement, joy, or deep emotional connection, those feelings become tied to your presence. On the other hand, if you are consistently linked with stress, anxiety, or neediness, those emotions will be what define you in their mind. This is where most people make their biggest mistake. Instead of creating a strong, lasting emotional imprint, they overwhelm the interaction with desperation, seeking constant validation, and unknowingly linking themselves to negative emotions in the process. Think about the experiences in your own life that stand out. Chances are, they are not the ones that were merely logical or practical. They are the moments that stirred something within you. The moments where you felt truly alive. The moments that triggered emotions so powerful that they became embedded in your memory. This is what makes the emotional imprint strategy so effective. It is not about forcing someone to miss you. It is about making them feel something so deeply that their mind naturally returns to you even when they least expect it. The human brain is wired to seek pleasure and avoid pain. If you consistently create pleasurable emotions when someone is with you, they will begin to crave that feeling, even in your absence. This is why the most magnetic people are not necessarily the most physically attractive or the most successful. They're the ones who evoke strong emotions, the ones who make others feel seen, valued, and deeply connected. They know how to leave an impression that lingers. But the opposite is also true. If every interaction is filled with stress, arguments, insecurity, or emotional dependency, the brain begins to associate that person with discomfort. And what does the brain do when it experiences discomfort? It tries to escape. It looks for relief elsewhere. This is why so many people find themselves being ignored, overlooked, or abandoned. They have unknowingly trained the other person's mind to link them with negative emotions. To create an emotional imprint that makes someone miss you, you must become a source of high-value emotions. This does not mean constantly entertaining or trying too hard to impress. It means understanding what emotions are most powerful in shaping connections and learning how to evoke them effortlessly. Mystery is one of the most powerful emotions in human psychology. When something is unknown or unpredictable, the mind becomes fixated on it. The same applies to relationships. If you are entirely predictable, always available, and never leave room for intrigue, there is no reason for the mind to dwell on you. But the moment you introduce an element of uncertainty, an air of mystery, the brain begins to replay interactions, trying to make sense of the missing pieces. Emotional highs and lows are another key factor in creating a lasting imprint. People who experience extreme emotions together, whether through excitement, adventure, or deep, meaningful conversations, form stronger connections than those whose interactions remain neutral and uneventful. This is why relationships built on excitement and passion are often the hardest to forget. The mind becomes addicted to the intensity of the experience, constantly searching for ways to recreate that feeling. When you strategically control the emotions you evoke, you become someone whose presence cannot be ignored. This means knowing when to be warm and engaging, when to be distant and reserved, and when to leave an interaction before it loses its emotional impact. Most people make the mistake of overstaying in conversations, over-explaining their feelings, and trying too hard to be understood. But the truth is, the most powerful emotional imprints are created when someone is left wanting more. The power of nostalgia plays a critical role in this process. The mind has a way of romanticizing the past, filtering memories through the lens of emotion rather than logic. This is why people often remember old relationships, past experiences, and former connections with a sense of longing, even if they were not perfect. When you master the ability to create experiences that become nostalgic in someone's memory, you ensure that your presence will be felt even in your absence. Another key aspect of the emotional imprint strategy is association. The mind links emotions to specific triggers, whether it is a song, a place, a scent, or even a particular phrase. This is why certain songs can instantly transport you back to a specific moment in time, flooding you with emotions you hadn't felt in years. The same principle applies in relationships. If you can create associations that tie you to specific experiences or emotions, you become an anchor in that person's subconscious. They may not even realize why they are thinking about you, but something will remind them. A song on the radio, a place you visited together, a phrase you used often. Emotional intensity does not have to come from dramatic gestures or extreme situations. Sometimes the most powerful imprints are created through small, meaningful moments. A deep conversation that made them feel understood, a shared joke that no one else would understand, a subtle but powerful gesture that showed you truly saw them for who they are. These moments linger in the mind long after the interaction has ended. The people who struggle to be remembered are often the ones who fail to create strong emotional experiences. They remain too neutral, too forgettable, too easily replaced. They do not challenge the mind. They do not evoke strong feelings. They do not create moments that leave a lasting impact. But those who understand the art of emotional imprinting, they do not have to chase. They do not have to beg for attention. They do not have to force anyone to miss them. Their presence becomes unforgettable, not because they demanded it, but because they created emotions so powerful that the mind refuses to let them go. When something is scarce, it becomes valuable. This is a fundamental law of human psychology and economics. The rarer something is, the more people want it. This is why diamonds are more desirable than common stones, why limited edition items sell out quickly, and why people often only realize the worth of something once it is no longer within reach. The human brain is wired to assign greater value to what is not easily accessible, and this applies directly to relationships. When someone is too available, too predictable, and too eager, their perceived value diminishes. But when their presence is scarce, when they are not always easy to access, they suddenly become more intriguing, more desirable, and more significant in the mind of the other person. This is where the power of controlled availability comes in. Most people make the mistake of believing that the more they give, the more they will be appreciated. They assume that always being there, always responding immediately, and always saying yes will make someone value them more. But this approach has the opposite effect. When something is constantly available, it becomes expected rather than appreciated. There is no excitement, no anticipation, no longing. The mind does not register it as special. It registers it as ordinary. And what is ordinary is easily overlooked. Consider how the mind reacts when something is taken away unexpectedly. When a favorite product is discontinued, demand for it suddenly skyrockets. When a show ends on a cliffhanger, people become obsessed with finding out what happens next. The mind does not like unresolved situations, and it does not like losing something it has become accustomed to. This is why strategic absence is so powerful. When you are not always available, when your presence is not guaranteed, the other person's brain begins to register you as something valuable, something that requires effort to access, something that should not be taken for granted. But scarcity alone is not enough. It must be combined with high value. If something is rare but not desirable, it is still ignored. This is why simply pulling away without adding value to your presence does not work. It is not about playing games or making someone chase you out of frustration. It is about making them recognize that your presence adds something significant to their life. You must create a dynamic where your presence feels like a gift, something that enhances their experience, something that is worth waiting for, worth working for, worth appreciating. Think about the people you admire most. Chances are they are not people who are always readily available. They have a sense of purpose, a life of their own, a sense of independence that makes them stand out. They do not need to chase attention because their presence commands it naturally. This is the type of energy that creates desire. It is not about withholding affection or being distant just for the sake of it. It is about having a life so full and so engaging that when you do give your attention, it feels meaningful. This is where most people go wrong. They pull away in a way that feels forced or unnatural. They try to manipulate the situation by deliberately ignoring messages, creating artificial distance, or playing games that make them seem disinterested. But this backfires because it does not create true value. It only creates frustration. Instead of making the other person miss them, they end up making them resentful or indifferent. True scarcity is not about forced distance. It is about genuine independence. It is about having a purpose, a focus, and a sense of fulfillment that makes you naturally unavailable at times, not because you are trying to create longing, but because you are genuinely engaged in your own life. This is why people who have strong passions, deep ambitions, and rich personal lives are often more attractive. They do not need to prove their worth through constant presence. They do not need to beg for attention. Their energy alone is enough to make others gravitate toward them. When you cultivate this kind of presence, you become someone who is sought after rather than someone who is chasing. And this shift in dynamic is what makes the difference between being overlooked and being deeply missed. There is a reason why people often regret losing someone only after they have moved on. It is because that person's absence creates a void, a contrast that makes their value clear. When you are always there, the other person never experiences what life is like without you. They never have the opportunity to measure your impact. But the moment you step back, the moment you become less available, their mind starts to process what is missing. And this is where desire is born. The key is to strike the right balance. Too much availability diminishes value, but too much absence can lead to detachment. The goal is not to disappear completely, but to create enough space for appreciation to grow. This means being selective with your time and energy. It means not always saying yes, not always responding immediately, not always being the one to initiate. It means allowing the other person to feel your absence just enough for them to realize your worth. This is why confidence is essential. People who are confident in their own value do not feel the need to prove themselves through constant presence. They understand that their worth does not decrease just because they are not always accessible. They know that their energy, their presence, and their essence are valuable, and because of this, they do not chase, they attract. When you become someone whose time is precious, whose attention is earned rather than given freely, you shift the entire dynamic of the relationship. The other person begins to see you differently. They begin to value your presence in a way they never did before. They begin to anticipate your attention, to crave your interaction, to miss you in a way that feels deep and undeniable. And this is not because you played a game, but because you understood the psychology of value. The mind becomes addicted to uncertainty. This is a psychological phenomenon deeply rooted in human behavior. When people cannot predict what will happen next, their brains go into a heightened state of alertness, constantly trying to solve the puzzle. This is why people become obsessed with unpredictable relationships, cliffhanger endings in movies and games of chance. The uncertainty triggers a surge of dopamine, the brain's pleasure chemical, making the experience more thrilling and emotionally engaging. This principle applies directly to relationships. When interactions follow a predictable pattern, the brain loses interest. But when there is an element of mystery, when someone cannot fully predict what you will do next, it creates a powerful sense of intrigue and emotional attachment. Predictability is the enemy of excitement. If someone always knows exactly when you will text, what you will say, how you will react, and what your next move will be, their mind stops engaging with you in a meaningful way. You become part of their routine rather than a source of emotional stimulation. And once you become part of a routine, you risk becoming an afterthought. The key to making someone think about you constantly is to break that routine, to introduce enough unpredictability that their brain cannot fully figure you out. This keeps their attention locked on you, making them replay interactions, overanalyze messages, and wonder what you are thinking. The reason unpredictability works is that it disrupts the natural tendency of the brain to categorize and dismiss familiar experiences. When someone is predictable, their actions become automatic in the mind of the other person. Their presence becomes something that is taken for granted rather than something that demands attention. But when unpredictability is introduced, the brain is forced to pay closer attention. It has to analyze, interpret, and anticipate what might happen next. This process keeps you in the forefront of their thoughts, making them emotionally invested without even realizing why. One of the most effective ways to create this dynamic is by varying the way you communicate. Most people develop predictable texting habits without realizing it. They always respond within the same time frame, use the same style of messaging, and follow the same conversational patterns. But when you introduce variation, sometimes responding immediately, sometimes waiting, sometimes sending long, thoughtful messages, and other times keeping it short, you disrupt the expectation. The other person starts to pay closer attention to your behavior, wondering what it means. Their mind becomes more engaged, and without even realizing it, they start thinking about you more often. Another way to harness unpredictability is through emotional contrast. People are naturally drawn to relationships that evoke a range of emotions. If an interaction is always neutral, it does not create a deep impact. But when someone experiences both highs and lows in an interaction, their emotional connection becomes stronger. This is why roller coaster relationships, despite being unhealthy, are often so difficult to walk away from. The emotional ups and downs create a powerful psychological bond. While you do not need to create unnecessary drama, strategically allowing moments of intense emotional connection followed by moments of distance can make someone crave your presence. Social media is another tool that can be used to create unpredictability. Most people overshare or follow a predictable posting schedule, making their lives an open book. But when you become more selective in what you share, posting unexpectedly and leaving gaps in your online presence, it creates intrigue. The less people know about what you are doing, the more they speculate. They start checking your profile more often, wondering about your whereabouts and trying to piece together clues. This mental engagement keeps you on their mind even when you are not actively communicating with them. Unpredictability also works in how you express your emotions. When someone always knows exactly how you feel, they stop valuing emotional expressions. But when your emotions are expressed in a way that is not entirely predictable, sometimes showing affection intensely, other times pulling back slightly, it keeps the other person wondering. They start to crave validation, looking for signs that they are still on your mind. This creates a dynamic where they are now investing emotional energy into thinking about you rather than the other way around. The key to making unpredictability effective is balance. If you become too erratic, you risk creating confusion or frustration rather than intrigue. The goal is not to be inconsistent to the point of being unreliable, but to introduce enough variation that the other person cannot fully predict your actions. This keeps the emotional engagement high, making them anticipate and crave your next move. One of the biggest mistakes people make in relationships is becoming too predictable too soon. They lay out all their emotions, reveal all their thoughts, and become completely transparent in their action. While honesty is important, it is also essential to maintain a level of mystery. When someone feels like they have completely figured you out, they stop being curious. And when curiosity fades, so does emotional investment. Think about the people who have left the strongest impact on your life. Chances are they were not the ones who were always available and predictable. They were the ones who kept you guessing, who made you wonder about their thoughts and emotions, who introduced a level of unpredictability that made interactions exciting. This does not mean you have to be distant or cold, but it does mean that you should never become so predictable that you stop being interesting. Unpredictability also applies to physical presence. If someone always expects to see you at the same time in the same way, the interactions lose their impact. But when your presence is not always guaranteed, when you sometimes appear unexpectedly or withdraw when least expected, it creates a sense of anticipation. The human brain thrives on anticipation. The act of waiting for something, wondering when it will happen, and feeling the excitement of the unknown creates a stronger emotional response than the experience itself. This is why countdowns, surprise events, and unexpected gestures create such powerful emotional bonds. The final aspect of unpredictability is personal growth. When you are constantly evolving, learning new things, and expanding your horizons, you become someone who is naturally unpredictable. People who remain stagnant, who never change their routines or perspectives, become easy to categorize and eventually easy to forget. But when you are always growing, picking up new skills, engaging in different interests, and surprising people with new insights, you become someone who cannot be fully figured out. This makes people want to stay connected to you, to see where your journey leads, and to remain part of your evolving story. The power of nostalgia is one of the most underestimated forces in human psychology. It is the ability to transport someone back in time, to make them relive emotions, sensations, and moments that were once significant. Nostalgia is not just a memory. It is an emotional experience, a feeling that brings warmth, longing, and a deep sense of connection to the past. When used correctly, nostalgia has the power to make someone miss you intensely. to remind them of the unique experiences they shared with you, and to create a longing so strong that it becomes almost impossible to ignore. The human mind does not remember events in a neutral way. It filters, edits, and reshapes memories based on emotions. This is why, in many cases, people tend to remember the good times more than the bad. When a relationship or connection ends, the mind often blocks out the negative and amplifies the positive. It focuses on the laughter, the shared moments, the inside jokes, and the little details that made the connection special. This is why people often find themselves missing someone long after they have gone. They are not just missing the person, they are missing the version of themselves they were when they were with that person. Understanding this gives you an immense advantage. Instead of trying to force someone to miss you through words or direct actions, you can trigger their nostalgia in subtle ways that feel organic. One of the most powerful methods is through sensory triggers. The brain associates certain smells, sounds, songs, and even textures with memories. A particular song can instantly bring back memories of late-night drives, deep conversations, or moments of laughter. A specific scent can transport someone back to a time when they were happiest with you. Even certain phrases or expressions can reignite feelings they thought were long gone. To activate nostalgia, you must first understand what made your presence unique. What were the small details about you that stood out? Was it the way you laughed, the way you spoke, the places you introduced them to, the experiences you created? Nostalgia works best when it is deeply personal. This is why generic memories do not have the same impact. If you can subtly remind someone of moments that only you shared, you tap into a part of their mind that no one else has access to. Social media can be a powerful tool in triggering nostalgia. A carefully chosen post, a song shared on your story, a location check-in, or even a picture that does not directly reference them but reminds them of a shared experience can be enough to stir emotions. The key is subtlety. If you try too hard, the effect is lost. Nostalgia works best when it feels accidental, when the person stumbles upon a memory rather than feeling like it was forced upon them. The most powerful memories are the ones that catch us off guard, the ones that make us pause and suddenly feel something deep in our chest. Another way to activate nostalgia is through mutual connections. People often relive memories when they talk to others who were part of those moments. If you were part of a group, a shared experience, or a particular social setting, simply being brought up in conversation can make someone recall the past. This is why people often start missing others when they revisit old places, hear familiar names, or see mutual friends. It reminds them of a time when that person was part of their world. Handwritten notes, meaningful gifts, or personal gestures from the past also hold immense nostalgic power. In a world where digital communication is dominant, anything physical carries a stronger emotional weight. A note found in an old book, a keepsake from a trip, or even an item that once belonged to you can instantly transport someone back to the emotions they once felt. People do not just remember things, they remember the way those things made them feel. Timing is also crucial in triggering nostalgia. People are more susceptible to nostalgic feelings during certain times, late at night, during the change of seasons, on special dates, or during moments of solitude. This is why people often miss others the most around holidays, anniversaries, or even on random quiet evenings. If you understand when someone is most likely to be reflective, you can increase the chances of your presence being felt in their mind. Emotional contrast plays a significant role in nostalgia as well. If a person is currently experiencing something mundane or unfulfilling, their mind will naturally drift to more exciting or meaningful times. This is why exes often miss someone when their current situation lacks the depth or intensity of what they once had. When someone compares a dull present to a vibrant past, they start longing for what they lost. One of the most effective ways to harness nostalgia is to continue evolving. When someone sees that you are growing, experiencing new things, and thriving, it adds another layer to their nostalgic feelings. They start to wonder what it would be like to share in your new experiences. They compare who you were then to who you are now, and in doing so, they realize how much they miss being part of your story. Nostalgia is not just about looking back. It is about making someone feel like they are missing out on something that is still unfolding. Creating nostalgia does not mean dwelling on the past. It means shaping the past in a way that makes the present feel incomplete without you. It is about leaving a lasting imprint on someone's memory, making them associate you with some of the best moments of their life. When this happens, missing you is no longer a choice. It becomes an automatic response. The principle of scarcity is one of the most powerful psychological triggers in human behavior. When something is readily available, it is often taken for granted, but when access to it becomes limited, its value increases exponentially. This is true for material things, opportunities, and most importantly, people. The mind is wired to desire what it cannot easily have, and the moment something becomes scarce, it triggers a sense of urgency and emotional attachment. This is why people only realize the true worth of something when it is no longer easily accessible. The same applies to relationships. When you make yourself too available, when you are always within reach, you lose the psychological advantage of scarcity. But when you strategically limit access to yourself, you create a pull that makes someone crave your presence in ways they never expected.